The House Energy Communications and Technology Committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please please call the roll? Sorry about that.
Chair Scott,
Present.
Representatives Andrews, Coleman,
Here.
Whitsitt,
Here.
Neely,
Here.
Burns,
Here.
Churches, Hill,
Here.
McDonald,
Here.
McFall,
Here.
Wenzel,
Here.
Outman,
Here.
Aragona,
Here.
Bagol,
Here.
Green,
Here.
Preston,
Here.
Schmaltz.
Here.
Madam Clerk, you have Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
We need a motion to adopt the minutes from the March 1st meeting. Okay. Rep. Coleman moves to adopt the minutes. Okay. So at this time, we're going to have the state's cybersecurity team. I really appreciate all of you all being here. We're going to start with Breanne Anderson, the legislative liaison, and then we'll have everybody else introduce themselves.
I will be short and sweet and turn it over to our wonderful team within DTMB as well as our cyber partners to introduce themselves.
All right. Well, thank you and good morning. Happy International Women's Day. So we're honored here to talk to you today, the Energy, Communication, and Technology Committee. Michigan's current cybersecurity state is something to be proud of. We are known as a longstanding leader in the cybersecurity space nationally. I would like to personally thank the governor and the legislature for your continued support in cybersecurity during this digital era. Significant budget investments have been made, which are allowing us to modernize our cybersecurity practices and enhance our abilities to be able to protect the Michigan residents. However, the cybersecurity landscape is constantly changing. Therefore, we can't just rely on our past history in order to be able to protect ourselves. We constantly need to evolve. Our advanced persistent threat actors, who are often backed by nation states, are constantly changing and constantly adapting. Therefore, we must. So please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Laura Clark, and I am the Chief Information Officer for the state of Michigan. I was formerly the Chief Security Officer for the state of Michigan. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Jason Cavendish, and then we'll go down the line and allow everybody to introduce themselves.
Hi, good morning. It's my honor and pleasure to be here. I'm Jason Cavendish. I'm the Acting Chief Security Officer for the state of Michigan.
Good morning. Thanks for having us here today. I'm Jim Ellis. I'm a Detective First Lieutenant with the Michigan State Police, and I oversee what we call MSP Cyber, which is the Michigan Cyber Command Center, our Computer Crimes Unit, and the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And I'll go into those a little bit more later.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I am Lieutenant Colonel John Brady, the commander of the 272nd Cyber Operations Squadron in Battle Creek, Michigan, part of the Michigan Air National Guard, here representing the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs.
All right. I would like to thank the individuals that joined me today for your continued dedication and leadership in the cybersecurity space and protecting our residents. Due to the interconnectivity of the digital era, we cannot fight cybersecurity alone. We need to be successful, or to be successful, we need to work together. I often say it, but I think it's worthy saying again, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. Though our mission is to secure the executive branch offices, systems, and data, Michigan is the state of Michigan is looked to by individual organizations, both in the government and in critical infrastructure, to help secure the residents of our state. Today's agenda, we're going to cover a lot of different things, so I'll talk quickly, and each one of us will take a different topic. Today, we're going to review the current state of cybersecurity, the threat landscapes, and some of the emerging threats that we're seeing. We're also going to talk about the interconnectivity of the cybersecurity ecosystem and highlight some of the activities our partners are working on. Our residents are also vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks. So we're going to talk about some of the new tools and some of the things that we're doing to help develop some resources for our individuals. And then finally, we're going to discuss the next steps and some of the activities that we're doing to continue to expand our cybersecurity abilities. The state of cybersecurity, like I said, is something that we are proud of here in Michigan. We would, sorry, we would like to provide a picture of today's current landscape, highlight some of the recent specific events, and how they've impacted our citizens, not just in the digital space, but how some of these have actually manifested into physical implications to our businesses and our residents. Just to frame the level of conversation, this is a scary statistic, but we believe that this is helpful for you to understand kind of the fight that we're fighting on a daily basis. At the state of Michigan, in our environment alone, we are blocking over 90 million malicious intrusion attempts every day. The thing is, we have to block all of those. Our cybersecurity adversaries, they only need to make one point of entry, right? So they know they can fail multiple times, but we have to be always successful. The state of the cybersecurity, as you turn on the news every single day and you listen to what's going on, cybersecurity is now a household word. This wasn't necessarily something that we talked about openly in the media 5 years ago when I started in this position. But with the way that things are changing and the impacts that it's having on our society, we see news stories, really scary stories about what's happening out there and what people are trying to do. Cybersecurity also is a very big business for cyber criminals. They're really looking to gain an advantage and to be able to make money off from the data that is entrusted to us by our residents. In 2022, the size of cybersecurity, the size of the budget that the federal government has actually proposed went up to $58 billion. This is a huge increase over previous budgets. The average cost of a data breach in the US in 2022 is $8.64 million. That's how much an average company or an average recovery costs. This is more than 5 million higher than the global average. Malicious actors are attacking governments, schools, small businesses, and critical infrastructure. We've even seen that trend here in Michigan. Many of you probably saw the news stories in the headlines of the U of M healthcare system that was attacked recently by a pro-Russian cybersecurity group. We had 2 community colleges this past year that were impacted by ransomware and had to close classes down for multiple days, which interrupts our learning and the ability for our students to be able to have the education that they need. It has also impacted our K through 12 schools, and we recently saw a ransomware event in Jackson at the Jackson ISD. So many of you are aware, obviously, that we had the geopolitical tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Some of you may not completely understand the picture of how that impacts us from a cybersecurity space, but Russia is one of the most advanced cybersecurity nation states in the world. They spend a lot of money on cybersecurity, and they help back cybersecurity groups that aren't necessarily part of their government. However, there's a lot of intelligence and a lot of advanced skills within Russia. So as the Russian-Ukraine situation started to become tense and escalate, DTMB and the state of Michigan looked to our partners, Michigan State Police, Michigan National Guard, as well as many of our partners at the federal level, to start sharing intelligence long before any kind of invasion happened. Thankfully, our state is very well prepared. In 2020, 2015, the state of Michigan published the Cybersecurity Disruption Response Plan, also known as the CDRP. This plan is the framework for how we're going to work together to respond to a cybersecurity incident. So we have had this plan in place for multiple years, obviously. We practice this plan. So just like you would for, a sporting event or a musical event, something like that, that you need to be able to perform at a high level, we also practice on an annual basis. We've even done practices where we actually have practiced with the activation of the State Emergency Operations Center and learned many things about how our communications are and how to respond to an event that's a digital event versus a physical event. We are in the process. It seems like maybe 2025 or 2015, is kind of an old plan. But really what this does is it sets that framework for us. It doesn't give us exact specific details, but it shows us how to work together, how to communicate together, what are the various levels of an event, and how to escalate through those levels. So once the tensions and the intelligence showed that there was a very high likelihood that there was going to be an invasion and that it was going to involve a cybersecurity aspect of some sort, we actually started activating the CDRP and pulled together our cybersecurity disruption response team. So what that is a list of multiple agencies that come together, share intelligence, and ensure that we have active abilities to be able to communicate through multiple platforms. Because this is a cyber event and there's a likelihood that there will be some kind of disruption in the digital space, we have to think about alternative ways to be able to communicate if our technology goes down. So we had to make sure that we had our contacts list with our phone numbers, up and running. We had to test our public safety communication radios. So if that was the only means of communication that we had, that we could actually work through there. So before the actual invasion of the Ukraine, what we ended up doing is getting into what we refer to as a ready state. So we wanted to be ready in case something happened. And to use the term that the federal government was telling us, we wanted to have our shields up, meaning we needed to protect ourselves and we had to be ready in case something happened. Thankfully, we did a lot of monitoring, we did a lot of sharing of information, and we didn't see any direct attacks or threats at the state of Michigan. But we were able to share a lot of information. We were able to use information that was coming through to add protections and alerts into our systems in case we did. Now I'm going to hand it over to Jason Cavendish so he can talk about some more specific attacks that we saw over the past couple of years.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, so, before the CDRP was called to action in February of last year, around December of 2020, Log4j, which was a well-known, well-publicized attack on a common Java library, became known to the world. And, as we began to look at what the effects on us were, we realized very quickly that it was very broad and deep. Many applications that were developed using the Java programming language used this library and were affected by that particular attack vector. And so what we did is very quickly assessed what our blast radius was, how much could be affected, and then tried to acquire tooling that would help us protect that area while we worked through a get well plan. That enabled us to be more prepared for subsequent events that came afterwards as well. So when that event occurred, no one knew. It was a 0 day. I guess that's where I was trying to get to. It was a 0 day event where it was brand new. There was no mitigations for it. There was no protections immediately available. And we found ourselves in a situation where we needed to respond very quickly to that type of event and didn't really have all of the tools necessary at our disposal. And so we very quickly were able to acquire a tool through a third-party support vendor in the cloud to help us with that. That allowed us, if you can go to the next slide, yep, thank you. That allowed us to address this next vulnerability that came up, Spring for Shell, which is a very similar thing. It's a Java framework that allows more rapid development to occur in that Java application programming environment. It allows you to get kind of a jump start in the process. And it was used very broadly, so any Java development that used the Spring framework was basically affected by this vulnerability. So again, a very widespread, very impactful vulnerability, and because of the tooling that we put in place through Log4j, we were able to address that in minutes and hours as opposed to days and weeks. And so it was a good success story for us to be able to demonstrate the decisions that we had made previously, helping us as we move forward into the future to be able to address these types of attacks as we move forward. Okay, so Laura has already talked a little bit about some of the ransomware attacks that we've seen that have been on the rise. The thing that I would like to key in on a little bit more about that is for Kalamazoo Community College, for Kellogg Community College, they were able to recover and are still in business today. But the reality is nationally, there are a lot of universities that are long-standing, storied universities that have had large-scale ransomware attacks that are no longer educating our nation because they have had such a dramatic impact to their finances through not being able to enroll new students, not being able to actively finish semesters, that they've had to literally shut their doors and are out of business. So these are things that we're trying to protect against. They are events that are sometimes targeted events. Sometimes it's an attack of opportunity. There's not really always a great rhyme or reason. So in police work, I think Detective Sergeant Ellis will talk about this later, but we typically look for a method of operation. What is your MO? And so some of the things that we also do is look for those indicators of compromise, those tactics, techniques, and procedures. We build a library of those. We do hunts across our environment to see if we can identify those types of indicators of compromise, tactics, techniques, and procedures actively in our midst so that we can identify maybe things that were kind of flying under the radar that are happening that we weren't already aware of. And we've become really reasonably efficient at that to the point where I kind of talk about ransomware at the state of Michigan as a commodity event. We have a well-practiced, well-oiled machine to address those types of things when they affect us. It doesn't mean that we're never going to have a massive event, unfortunately. Despite our preparedness, those 0 days do continue to occur and can affect us at any time. Okay. So yeah, residents are vulnerable too. It's not just our state systems that we have to protect. We are also, very actively trying to help with our external engagement groups and protect citizens from everyday life in the digital economy. Ransomware is every bit as effective in a single system as it is in a suite of systems, so you could be affected at home. The best way there was a study that was done by Medium.com, which is it's a publishing platform for a variety of different topics. Cybersecurity and IT and information technology is one of those. And there was a study that was done by the IT side where they took a hacker to a cafe, and within 20 minutes, that individual had information about where the people that were in the cafe lived, what their driver's licenses were in some cases, the last 5 places they had visited on Google from the devices that they had connected to that false wireless access point that mimicked the cafe's free wireless access. So it just goes to show that while we believe that our activities are potentially innocuous, we're not doing anything that anyone else isn't doing, but it does subject us to a lot of cyber attack as a result. Yeah, So criminal and foreign. So, you know, in the example of the coffee shop, the reality is, you know, when you're in a hotel, when you are at your favorite eating establishment, many of them are offering these free Wi-Fis, and it's very possible for a hacker to spoof that and obtain your information and view everything that you're doing while you're there. And so the best thing to do in this case is to rely on your LTE, your 5G, your cellular devices, and use a VPN to protect yourselves in those locations and events. And don't trust the inherent available wireless that may be available to you, because there's really no guarantee that it's safe. All right, and you know, applying these best practices to your home as well. Your internet service provider at your home is under really no legal obligation to secure your environment. They may provide you with some security features depending upon which internet service provider you're using, but it's really our responsibility as users of those internet connectivities to protect ourselves and be responsible for that. And the best way you can do that is to use a VPN and or to have your own firewall and network configurations that you manage if you're so capable. Next slide. Yeah. So additional resource, I'm sorry, back one up.
We're really excited about this one.
So what other resources do we make available? We talked a little bit earlier about the CDRP and how we bring that group together to practice. Well, one of the groups that we bring into that is the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. That is a group of volunteer cyber professionals that are legislatively enabled to work on local units of government and help when a cyber attack has occurred. So it's got to be an imminent threat that has affected that particular group, and then we can go in as cyber professionals and help get them well. That is in conjunction with the Michigan Cyber Command Center. They are the spear of the tip of the spear in that regard, and they do most of the victim communication and then communicate with the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps to activate that service. The other areas that we have are the Cyber Resource Hub, which is a public-facing DTMB-provided safe resource for the public to learn more about cyber, learn about some of the things that I've already talked about, and gain access to training and available resources that they can help to take some of those actions, like how do you configure your own firewall or local network at your home. And then there's the Cyber Partnerships. That is a local unit of government community that we help foster and build so that the local units of government can work together and help one another directly. And we sponsor a monthly event as well as cyber assessments and things like that through the MyDeal program that allow them to better understand what risks they currently face within their areas. And then finally, we have the Michigan Secure app, which is an application for your mobile devices that's provided free of charge to the public so that they can have a means to protect themselves from phishing, to identify those insecure wireless access points that I talked about, as well as potentially malicious applications that you might install on your device. And that's a free application for the public. Thank you. All right, so it used to be that all of the things that we needed to protect were on a controlled, managed network that was local to the state of Michigan, and then the pandemic happened, and we all went home. And suddenly, instead of having one giant network that I needed to protect, I had 55,000 plus that I had to figure out how we were protecting and where the devices that went home with our employees and staff and all of you safe in your homes and where you worked. And as you just heard me talk about, that's not always the case just by connecting to your home wireless. So that was a large undertaking that we had to address, and many of the things that we're doing today, zero trust architecture is a buzzword that you may hear. It is something that we're trying to implement at the state. It doesn't mean that we don't trust individuals. It means that we want to validate and ensure that the things that you're trying to access are appropriate for your work and for the things that you should be able to do to enable you to better be effective and efficient in your jobs. And so that's kind of what this pretty picture is how that kind of operates. All right, so I already talked about practicing good cyber hygiene. Some of the things that you can do are to, so I talked about securing your connections, have that firewall, having that local network being secured in your home, and the resources that are available to help you learn how to do that if you're not already aware, or finding a good partner that might be able to help you do that as well. Then, changing your passwords and using multi-factor authentication is huge. One of the things that we saw recently, LastPass, one of the main password management tools, a tool that I use and will continue to use to give them a little boost there on their continued effectiveness, was breached. And the way they were breached was through their supply chain and through some of the libraries that they use. So hackers got in and were able to make off with some of the security mechanisms that protect those passwords when they're stored in that application. And in spite of that, I would still encourage people to use a password manager, and I would encourage you to use multi-factor authentication both to access that password manager as well as your more sensitive sites like your banking institutions and finances and things like that. Okay. So, we've kind of talked about already quite a bit about the partnerships that we have throughout the state, and our state agencies are also our partners, not just Michigan State Police and the Department of Military Veterans Affairs, but other organizations like EGLE and Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the Michigan Education Department are all very active in working with us, as are many of the other state agencies. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Detective First Lieutenant Jim Ellis to talk a little bit about cybercrime and fraud on a computer.
Thanks, Jason. So we see a lot. Obviously, we're the criminal investigation side of a lot of cyber within Michigan. A lot of times I get the question of, hey, should we prosecute, should we not prosecute? Regardless of what the answer is there, I tell everybody to call us, because even if we take a look at a case, maybe we can pull evidence, maybe it's worth prosecuting, maybe we can go after the bad guy, right? Because a lot of bad guys are in other countries. And I can talk about that in a minute, but we still want to, and Jason touched on this, we still want to know what happened on your network, on your device, whatever it might be, because we want those indicators of compromise, because one of our goals and one of the functions that we do outside of criminal investigations on the proactive side is the prevention and awareness. So if I can go to a network that's somebody that's just got breached, infiltrated with something, whatever it might be, if I can go in, get some evidence, work with the IT folks, if there is IT folks, find out what those indicators of compromise are, I can push that back out to everybody else for prevention and awareness anonymously, so they can take those extra steps to prevent them and help them not become a victim. So that's a big part of what we do also. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So let me give you just kind of an overview real quick. I'll try not to talk for an hour, which I seriously could with what we do. How does MSP fit into this ecosystem? We got into cyber probably with the Michigan Cyber Command Center 10 years ago. 11 years ago. We've been involved in computer crime, investigating it since 1999-2000. There's 3 units listed on this slide. The oldest one, I still consider it young, even though it's 1999-2000, is the computer crimes unit. That is where we investigate all types of computer crime, regardless of what it may be. Since we are MSP, we are a support agency for the other 580 plus law enforcement agencies in Michigan. So if I look at numbers, 70% of what we do on that side of the house is to support other law enforcement, whether it is them bringing in a device, them bringing in a computer to retrieve evidence, maybe they'll bring in a hard drive, a phone, some other mobile device, a vehicle, you name it. If it can store data that could potentially be evidence, we'll try to get it off of that device. Sometimes the other 30% of that are those cases that we originate and run with, that we're investigating as an agency. So we have both sides on the CCU side, or the Computer Crimes Unit. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, there's 61 task force throughout the United States. We have one in Michigan that I oversee, and that allows us to investigate crimes against children, child sexually abusive material crimes, child pornography, as though some say, even though it's more than that. And we get funding from DOJ for that specifically. That's what brings officers into our office, full-time, part-time, that get trained, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But that's ICAC. You'll hear that acronym. The newest unit up there is the Michigan Cyber Command Center that Jason mentioned, and Laura, or the MC3, not to be confused with the Cyber Corps, which is the MyC3. So the Michigan Cyber Command Center, that is the investigative arm for intrusions, breaches. We work closely with public-private sector, municipalities, something they see on their network, they'll call, we'll go in and try to assist them. Just to kind of give you an idea of how we're laid out in Michigan, I currently have 9 offices. I'm opening probably 2 more throughout the state. 60 MSP members, both uniform and civilian. I have digital forensic analysts, detective trooper investigators. I've got 2 analysts that specifically handle cyber tips. We get 1,400 tips on average a month from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So I have 2 people dedicated just looking at those tips, and that number goes up. I've got federal resources. One of my gentlemen on the Michigan Cyber Command Center works with the FBI Cyber Task Force, so he's our liaison for the FBI. I've got another member that works Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, out of Detroit. Specialty is dark web investigations, so they work on the dark web task force. Great relationships with all of our other federal partners, DHS, CISA, Secret Service, great collaboration among law enforcement there. So yeah, we take in, just to give an example of what we bring in a month, about 1,000 devices a month to be analyzed statewide. That we're physically looking at. A lot of times we will, maybe an agency will give us something, a piece of evidence to analyze. We'll analyze it, pull whatever we can off of it, and give it back to them, and they run with the investigation. So it goes both ways. There's sometimes they don't have the capabilities to look at the evidence we give them back. We'll assist and point things out based on the investigation and help them out too. So that kind of gives you a roundabout idea of how MSP fits into this. I will say with the ICAC side of the house, I mentioned 60 MSP members. I have about another 45 that work in our offices that work on complaints for their departments. It's tough getting local law enforcement to give us a body for 2 days a week to full-time. But once they're there, they realize how big of an asset they are, and they kind of end up being the go-to for their agency because we can supply them equipment for free, training for free through the federal funding that we get. So that's a huge bonus. This next slide kind of shows a progression of an incident coming in. Before it comes, on the left side of the slide, before it comes to MSP, it could come from a multitude of sources. Somebody could call us directly. It could come from DTMB, National Guard, any of you, critical infrastructure, public-private sector, anybody. A lot of times we'll get a referral from local agencies if they feel they don't have the capability to investigate it, and we'll help them do whatever they need for us. If they just want help investigating it, we'll provide that, whatever we can. If they're out doing a search warrant, maybe they don't know what to seize, we'll go out with them on the search warrant and help them in that manner too. But this kind of shows you, it eventually comes to MSP if it doesn't come directly to us. The Michigan Cyber Command Center is a part of MSP. If once we're talking to a victim or a potential victim, if they need additional resources, let me use an example of a county government, for instance. If for some reason they had something happen on their network, ransomware, business email compromise, whatever it might be, and they need to take extra security measures and maybe reimage all their devices. If they've got to reimage, even if it's only 100 devices, they may only have 3 IT staff working. That's where extra resources come in. That's where the MyC3 can come in and arrive on site, and under the direction of that victim, they may be hands-on keyboards to help them get them back up and running again. Maybe they have an appliance, and we've had this happen before. Maybe they have a firewall appliance that entity is not familiar with. There's a good pool of MyC3 members that we can call up and say, hey, does anybody know how to use this particular appliance? Somebody usually indicates so, and they'll go in and show them and pull logs and do whatever they need to do to help with this investigation and or just get them back up and running. So some of our other resources I already talked about, that's on that slide. FBI, we work very closely with Attorney General's office. There's probably not a high-level crime that goes on in Michigan that we're not a part of someplace. You may not hear our name, but we may be working the case on the background or on the back end just to supply the evidence that somebody needs. Outside of the criminal investigation aspect, we're very involved with cyber on the proactive side. And I threw a few things in here, and I'm not going to go into detail on all these, but vehicle defense research, one of the things we started to do probably 6-7 years ago with the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Volpe Center, and some others, is looking at cybersecurity when it comes to vehicles. How do we, especially fleet vehicles, how do we ensure security in those vehicles if they're in response mode? Everybody's heading to a major incident. We don't want those getting shut down, or from the average hacker that wants to get into our vehicles. So we've been working with fleet managers from around the U.S. And within Michigan, because Michigan is the automotive sector, right? So we have great relationships with the automotive sector, every manufacturer, in working with them. Some of the events like the Auto Truck Boat Challenge, we've been doing that for a few years, where that kind of goes hand in hand with the first one. Working with the auto manufacturers, we will bring in some of the brightest high school and college students that have been identified to actually hack vehicles, boats, and trucks. So it's a great event. I encourage when we do it, it's interesting to see, because these kids, I'll call them kids, almost have a job when they get done with this, with whatever they're doing, whatever education, where they're at with their education. But that we learned a lot from that. We actually bring in a couple patrol cars, and they try to hack into them, some of our equipment. They're pretty successful. Luckily, the manufacturers are there. We'll reflash everything so we can use the cars again. But great event. We host a lot of cyber investigation training. I mentioned we are a support agency. We train a lot of other law enforcement on how to investigate cyber. I want to say we trained close to 1,000 officers last year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we only have so many people in our end that we can get trained. If we could do it full-time, we would do it full-time. But there's also industry training that law enforcement can go to. High security data project. We work on a lot of other projects. One of the things we're working on now, we have standard encryption out there that we can encrypt files, we can store them in a safe place, but because we deal with, I'll call it child pornography again, a lot of photos, videos, audio, we don't feel comfortable just storing it in the cloud under normal encryption or industry standards. So we're working on a solution that does some things to our data so we could safely store some of the CSAM in the cloud. And there's some things that allows us to do, that allows us to share more easily among our offices. If we were working on a case for an agency, they can either bring it in, because right now if they bring in a case, it's usually hand-to-hand in the lobby because it's evidence. We maintain chain of custody. They provide us a copy of the search warrant, all that. But if we could do this via cloud in a safe manner, and that's the key, They could submit it to us electronically. We could analyze it, send them back the results electronically, and that would decrease case turnaround time and help get the prosecutions going and/or proving innocence if somebody is not a part of the.
Reducing victim exposure.
Yeah. Defensive forensics, that kind of goes back, or offensive forensics. I have some very smart people that work for me that are working on tools that help with investigations. Because we have a tool set, our licensing is probably close to $1 million with all the tool sets that we use for everybody around the state. Cybersecurity assessments, we do high-level assessments for critical infrastructure, public-private sector, dark web scanning. If oftentimes we have a great collaborative relationship with Jason, Laura, and their team, Michigan Cybersecurity, the MySOC that manages all the endpoints that we all use. If, for instance, if something happens on the state of Michigan side, we can go out there and scan for maybe email addresses that end in michigan.gov. Maybe a company, company documents, they want somebody to scan for that. We can proactively or reactively go out there and scan the dark web. Sometimes we find things on our own. I think a lot of times we'll get a list of michigan.gov email addresses or usernames, but a lot of times they're older, they've already been changed. They were before we had good password policies. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we look for on the dark web. Cyber industry competitions and cybersecurity outreach, those kind of go together. We're all involved in exercises for the state of Michigan, tabletop exercises. They talked about the CDRP. We exercise that at least once a year, usually more than that. And then my folks and DTMB and National Guard, there's different events throughout the year at conferences that we all get involved in, kind of a gaming type hack. I don't want to call it hackathon, but it's a competition among agencies. And we do it internationally with the National Guard. And everybody learns a lot of good techniques. Red team, blue teaming is a term you'll hear, but just to give you an idea, that's how we fit into this. And Jason and Lauren did mention that we are, even today, I think we still stand in the top 10% nationwide of how we collaboratively work together, the things we do together. Other states are just trying to figure some of this out. I was on a call the other day where one of the states is now just setting up the Michigan Cyber Command Center type concept. So Michigan is very unique. I think we're leaps and bounds ahead of where a lot of other states are. Other states are looking at what we do. I've been to multiple states talking about what we do, especially with the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps and how they can replicate that, and they have. But maybe more than you wanted to know, but I can keep going. But I'll leave it there and give John a chance to talk.
All right. Good morning, and thank you again for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm representing the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, specifically focused on the cyber portion of the Michigan National Guard. So starting in the upper left-hand part of the slide, we have two teams in Michigan, one Army and one Air side, which is actually unusual because Michigan is one of only 11 states that have an Air National Guard cyber protection team assigned. Most states will have a portion of an Army cyber protection team assigned. They're divided amongst 3 states. So our Army cyber protection is divided between Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. Both of these teams follow U.S. Cyber Command guidance in regards to the composition and training of the team, so that training is fairly standardized in that aspect. Cyber protection teams are, as the name would imply, purely defensive in nature. The focus mission areas for cyber protection teams are on harden, assess, clear, and hunt. And what that means is the first two, harden and assess, are performed to improve a system's resilience against an adversary threat. And then the last two of hunt and clear are performed to identify adversary presence in a system, and then once identified, to clear them out of that space. Beyond the hands-on technical aspects of what we do, we offer assistance and advice to our state partners, as was mentioned previously in all of the other events that we collaborate in. But all of that in an effort to prevent cyber incidents and to help with response such as was discussed with the tabletop exercises we work with them in. To give you some idea, the National Guard it roughly follows a 70-30% mix of part-time to full-time staff. So 70% of our force is traditional guardsmen, our part-time staff that have civilian jobs. If you look over on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see kind of a sampling of some of the companies that our folks work for, and that's just a small sampling. You may see something like, Nationwide is an insurance provider, but they're doing insurance. They're providing cybersecurity to these organizations. And that's one of the big things that the Guard brings is that wide breadth of experience from a multitude of civilian employers. Bring that back to us and improve our operations, how we do business, and then that in turns through our collaboration with the state and other partners can help everybody across the board. But that 70% of our traditional guardsmen, they'll be in a military status maybe two days a month, more or less, and then do annual training for exercises. The other 30% of our force is full-time and responsible for providing initial and recurring training to meet the very stringent U.S. Cyber Command and service requirements in regards to training and maintaining those programs. Beyond that, we maintain those programs that a full active duty unit would have to maintain as well. So all of that is on our full-time staff in addition to those things. So keep fairly busy. So the training that we do is focused on meeting those requirements for our federal mobilizations, which also in turn allow us to be prepared for a cyber emergency within the states should one arise to that level, along the lines of a Colonial Pipeline or something like that, of that nature. Beyond that, we conduct innovative readiness training events, which allow us to work with state critical infrastructure entities, providing assessments while also meeting our training requirements. So we get a win-win on that one, which allows us to provide proactive cybersecurity benefits to the state while also meeting our federal recurring training requirements at no cost to the state. So on the lower left-hand side, you'll see some of the other states that do have Air National Guard squadrons within them, or cyber protection teams, if you're interested. I've also listed some of the other partners at the state and federal level that we've already kind of gone into. Beyond that, each of our 54 states and territories has with the National Guard, we have partnerships with other countries, which is known as the State Partnership Program. Our state partner is Latvia, and we work with them, as Lieutenant Ellis had alluded to, doing national level cyber exercises. We do 2 of those with them per year, one that we host and one that they host. And it's another good opportunity to share lessons learned and tactics across the board, which then again flows back into this whole ecosystem that we've developed here. So with that, I think that about concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will hand it back over to either Jason or Laura, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll take it back. So, thank you. We're running on to our last slide now, so thank you for bearing with us. I know this is a lot of information, a lot of dense information, a lot of somewhat scary information, but we did want to highlight a couple of things that we're doing and we're continuing to do. So on here are a lot of the day-to-day activities and the day-to-day things that we're continuing to do. I did mention earlier that there has been some investment made in cybersecurity, some significant investment in the last couple of budgets that we're working to modernize and advance our technology. But we are also afforded, to be able to hire additional resources and to be able to continue to focus on building the skill sets and advancing the skill sets of our current highly talented, highly dedicated staff that we have. Another thing that we did not necessarily have time to get into today, but we're happy to answer questions, is we are working with the federal government put out their infrastructure bill. And in that infrastructure bill, there was money for states to be able to use towards cybersecurity. Primarily, that investment is to help local agencies or local units within our state to be able to advance their practices and their protection. So 80% of the grant funding that Michigan has received is required to support local agencies, whether that's through a shared service that's set up at the state level that local agencies could consume, or individual grant dollars that go to local agencies to help build out their protection. So that's something that we're working quite actively on. We have been working to fulfill all of the requirements that are that come along with that federal funds, which includes a cybersecurity advisory group for that grant program, which include rural, urban, and suburban representatives for cybersecurity in those various stakeholder groups. We are working on, as part of a requirement, is our statewide plan for cybersecurity and what are the areas. So it's kind of a little bit of a current state assessment and then a gap analysis to see where are those areas that we could work together to improve to help protect our residents. So those were two programs that I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted, as I know there will be conversations ongoing on those. So, and with that, again, thank you for bearing with us today. I know that was a lot in 50 minutes. So I think that gives us a few minutes for any kind of questions that you may want to ask us.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much for that informative presentation. We really appreciate it. I do have a quick question. So what are the percentage of cyber attacks that are actually identified, arrested, and prosecuted?
That question comes up all the time. I would say, I don't have a percentage. It's probably.
Could you turn your mic on? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you.
We are more successful at prosecuting local cybercrime, whether it's insider threat, and that could be an employee, ex-employee, somebody that leaves the company, some other domestic type crime versus the ransomware, business email compromise, that are more difficult to make an arrest on. Luckily, we, with our federal partners at the FBI, HSI, and some of the other federal agencies, for instance, the FBI has, I think, 40-some legates all over the world. So if we can track something back to another country, that's where we work very closely with them to help identify bad guys. And I'll call them bad guys and leave it at that. But if I had to put a percentage on it from that type of prosecution, it would be low. We typically see our prosecution on the ICAC side of the house, child victimization, anything, whether it's local crime, that we can pinpoint just like a normal investigation. With maybe they facilitated their crime using cyber or a computer. We can still get that evidence and prosecute that crime just like we normally would. But I can't give you, I don't have a good number to give you
Okay.
percentage-wise.
I think
That's
an
good.
important thing on that too that I'd like to key in on is attribution becomes very difficult in a cyber event. But what we are able to do, and what you may hear a lot about, is the concept of advanced persistent threats and those nation-state organizations or nation-state actors. And so we can identify many times through those indicators of compromise and tactics, techniques, and procedures, common threads, so those methods of operation that I talked about earlier.
Right.
Those can be tied back to specific groups, and a lot of effort goes into disrupting their ability to continue to function. So by taking them offline, by seizing their assets from a cloud provider that maybe is how they're operating their business, that's one of the key ways that we disrupt that continued attack vector. So it's not always being able to actually prosecute a particular individual or group of individuals, but we can and have been successful in information sharing and analysis with multiple different groups that allow those groups to correlate that information and find the
bad
where
actors.
that's happening.
Yeah.
Yep, the bad actors. You
Okay.
got it.
Got it.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to open up to other questions. The chair recognizes Representative Schmaltz.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for all the work that you do in this area. I know it's a monumental task. You had mentioned the cyber attack in Jackson. It happened last November. It was a ransomware attack on Jackson Intermediate School District, and it caused a complete systems outage for schools in Jackson and Hillsdale counties, and kids were out of school for 3 days. What are you doing specifically to help K through 12 schools be better protected against this so kids don't suffer the consequences of being out of school so long?
Yeah, I think the best thing that we're doing in the way that we're helping the most is a couple of things. One, it's that Cyber Partners program that allows the communities of practice to get together and talk with one another about things they can do to better protect themselves in advance, so proactively protecting themselves. Two is the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps that we bring to bear to help them recover when they have those situations. And then three is what Laura was just talking about with regards to the state and local cybersecurity grant program. A vast majority of the planning that we're doing is directed very much at K through 12 and local units of government and how we can help them acquire the ability to do assessments of their current state so that we can figure out how to help them be better prepared for their future state.
And I think a key aspect of that is talking about, so Jason highlighted a lot of cyber hygiene things. Well, cyber criminals, because it is big business for them, they're often going after the known issues or the things that are already have patterns or ways to attack. And so helping ensure bring information at the level in which the organization is. So if we come in and we start talking about different things that maybe are pretty far advanced in the cybersecurity stack, but they haven't done the basic things like requiring passwords to be reset or multi-factor authentication, some of those earlier things, then it doesn't make sense to talk about the higher level stack items. So it's bringing the conversation at the level that they really need to. But I do think that the funding that is coming with the federal dollars helps, because a lot of the conversations at K through 12, whether and at local governments, is how do we allocate and how do we be able to use the dollars that we're getting. And it's not just cybersecurity, but they're discussing how do you provide all the program areas within your government, and cybersecurity is one of those. So to be able to have a specific pool of funding to focus on cybersecurity is very helpful. Now, I will say I think that the grant dollars are great to get the programs going, but we need to think about how do we build a sustainable funding source and able to maintain the level and to increase the advanced capabilities that are really needed.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Minority Vice Chair Wenzel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for that great presentation. It was very informative. In fact, I downloaded the app while we were talking, and it's great. So as technology advances constantly, I'm sure your job is a bit like whack-a-mole. You're constantly figuring out different things that are coming up, and one of those I noticed on the app is the QR code. I just learned recently that we're supposed to be careful at restaurants. They're changing out menus and attacking us that way. So one of my questions is how you're staying on top of that, what you see as some of the new things that are coming up, and how you're staying current. I see your plan was created in 2015. That seems like a while ago, so what kind of things are you doing to keep that current?
Yeah, so like I said, with the CDRP, that's really our playbook or our framework in which we use to respond to events. So it doesn't specifically spell out the technical details or the ways that we're going to approach the response to cybersecurity. That's more in our day-to-day operations, and then as we practice it, we practice those newer strategies. But this is more who needs to be involved, how do we do information sharing, and then, like I said before, the level in which, because there's a level that's normal day to day, which we're functioning in today, versus, catastrophic, where we have potential loss of, safety and critical systems, right? And there's 5 levels in there. So that's where the plan is. But by doing that exercising and being able to practice kind of the current techniques and strategies, that's helpful. We do have a statewide strategic cyber plan, which we are currently working with MEDC to focus on and revise that for more of a 2024-25 sort of plan. So we're in the discussions of how to do that. We haven't actually gotten into the meat of the content yet. But a lot of it is through that information sharing, ensuring that we have the technology, but we have the information sharing, and we do that training, right? Not just the exercising, but the training of what are those new tools, what are the new techniques. We constantly monitor the environment. So the federal government shares information. You know, we have multi-state initiatives that share that stuff. So making sure that we actually have people on staff that's their day-to-day job is to kind of follow that information and then to look for ways to train our individual employees. The other thing is we talked about cybersecurity being a shared practice. And what I mean by that is all of us in this room have responsibility of trying to figure out how to protect themselves. And so we do, State of Michigan has a security awareness training where we require all state employees to take a certain level of security training each year. A lot of that is reemphasizing those good cyber hygiene practices, but there are also things that our employees can do in their personal lives. Because what we find is if an employee is a good cybersecurity practitioner at home, which sometimes maybe clicks a little bit more for them because they're like, oh, I need to protect my family and my finances, my personal finances. If they're good practitioners at home, that travels, it carries into, the workplace. We also work with we do high school cyber challenges. Jim highlighted some of the things that they're doing from a training standpoint that involves students to try to help build out the number of professionals that are available to hire. The workforce in the lack of trained professionals, that's a big issue that CIOs and CISOs are facing in ensuring that we can maintain and keep the level of staff that we need to be able to protect our networks.
One of the things we do too on the MSP side is training is continuous. We are always, it seems like, playing catch up on the government side. So we try to stay proactive with training. My folks are going to training all the time. Just last week we had one of the automotive researchers in Michigan doing a training session for 20 members. FBI was in the audience or as a student, Secret Service, a lot of federal agencies. MSP members and local law enforcement were in and raved about the class because they learned what more they can do with a vehicle, either obtaining evidence or help protect the vehicle that they can then take back. But training is continuous and the learning does not stop. As Jason mentioned, I think earlier, is our funding is limited, bad actors is not, and they have all day to do what they need to do. So it's difficult.
And one last plug for the Michigan Secure app. As you already noted, the QR code reader in the Michigan Secure app will help you identify if that QR code is safe or not.
Oh, that's good. Okay, Chair recognizes Representative Green.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming today. This is fascinating, fantastic. I appreciate what you do, the work you do. So something that has come up and that is a growing issue is the teen-to-teen exchange of naughty pictures. And as a parent, it's really, you fear that because you don't know always. You do your best you can, lock down their phones, have that good hygiene, cyber hygiene. But how are we addressing that as a community? And then are kids actually being prosecuted for that?
That's a good question. A lot of this comes down to sextortion. When we see those cases on the rise, it's one of the bigger areas that we're seeing, and you kind of hit it right on the head. It comes down to kids exchanging or feeling like they have to exchange photos with each other. And we're seeing kids sending photos to somebody they think they know, but they really don't. As far as a parent goes, the biggest thing you can do, as difficult as this is it comes down to those conversations with your kids. I always tell parents, you've got to be able to look at their device. They should be able to, without question, hand their device over to you as a parent, go through it. It doesn't mean you have to look at all their text messages, but have some agreement with them and outline some of the things that sending photos to somebody or even receiving photos, depending on the age, could get them in trouble. And whatever they send, I mean, whatever you put out there is going to be out there. And that has consequences for a lot of our younger kids, generations. When they start getting job interviews, we've had vendors actually tell us, hey, while you're in the interview, can you log into your Facebook page or log into your Instagram and show us what kind of activities you're in? So it kind of starts at the topic you're talking about. We are starting to prosecute some of these. We had a case, a sextortion case, that happened in northern Michigan, and it resulted in an unfortunate circumstance where the victim actually took his life in that circumstance because of the humiliation with it. That suspect was overseas, and we are still working on that case. We've identified who we think it is. It's just a matter of getting cooperation now. Because even if we do have those liaisons in other countries, sometimes other law enforcement does not want to cooperate for a variety of reasons, which I'm not going to get into. But the biggest thing is having that good relationship with your children, good conversation, let them know what the consequences are, and if you can, look on their device. I'm not saying you have to, but they just need to know what the consequences are. Because kids nowadays, even when we were talking about the coffee shop example where they are learning a lot of information about folks, people don't realize what they put out on the internet, even if it's just Facebook, that started initially as messaging, photo sharing. Now it's, here's my pattern of life, everybody. And you can literally look at what somebody does and know what they're going to do day in and day out, and where they're going to be, what they're going to be doing, schedules. And just on top of Jason's example with that coffee shop, there was another incident where there was actually not a documentary, but a showing of the person obtained all this knowledge from somebody having a cup of coffee. They then walked up to them and started talking to them like they knew them, and talked about their kids' games that night, and hey, that recipe you gave me, because they posted something, and just had this dialogue, and the person was completely amazed that, how did you know this all about me? I have no idea who you are. And it's like, well, you posted all online. And it was an eye-opener, because people don't realize those little things they post every day, if you take that over a month, 2 month, 3 month, year period, you can get a good idea of what everybody's involved in. But more than you wanted to know, but it comes down to good conversation and having that communication with your children.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Burns. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for the presentation today. Very informative. So I feel like every time I turn on the news nowadays, I'm hearing about this Chat GPT, and it's worrisome to me because it just sounds creepy, quite frankly. But I'm wondering, is it something that is on the radar of cybersecurity professionals? Is it really cause for concern? Is it just one of those kind of strange things that's popping up?
I think it's like any tool. A screwdriver can be used for really egregious things. So I think the other side of it is the training that goes into that artificial intelligence, which is what ChatGPT is based on everything that the internet knew up through about 2020. And so it's not current, right? So there are things that have happened now. If you ask it certain questions about current events, it's not going to come up with an accurate answer. So I think it has its usefulness. It can absolutely be helpful. It can be helpful in a cybersecurity venue even. But you have to really take it in context. It's not the ultimate authoritative source for all knowledge. So it has to be very carefully used, I think.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Whitsitt.
Thank you for your presentation. You scared the crap out of me.
We were
So thank you.
successful there.
Thank you for that. You're very successful. I used to have a VPN, and I seem to have had blocks that came up connecting to Wi-Fi and so forth. But I'm looking at yours, the Michigan Secure. And as I go to connect to it, it says I'm on an unsecured Wi-Fi network. Should I be concerned right now?
It may be that the wireless network that is in here, because it's more publicly available, is not as secured as your normal work.
As you would be, is what you're trying to tell me. Okay, thank you.
And part of the beauty about the app is to notify you. It's not to tell you or to stop you from doing that, but to make you conscious that there is a possibility of an insecure wireless, connection that you have. And so if that's the case, then be careful about what you're doing with your phone at that moment, right? And so it might not be wise to open up your bank account and start doing things right now, but if you needed to Google something, maybe that would be a little bit different, right? So it helps the end user understand what's going on, where normally you wouldn't know that, right? And so you may not think about the fact that there could be an insecure app or an insecure connection that you're using.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Yes.
I'd just like to go back to the sextortion thing for a minute. I think it's nice to think about parents being able to look at their kids' phones, but I don't think that's reality. Mm-hmm. Don't you think it would be more effective if kids knew there was some legal aspect to this that could get them in trouble? I think that would be more effective in preventing them from doing something like this. I mean, you can say, oh, your pictures can go all over the place, or have parents look at it, but I don't think that's as effective to kids. But if they knew there was some type of legal problem, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I know that from my perspective, I have two daughters, and throughout their high school careers as they were becoming young ladies, we talked an awful lot. Now, I think the difference for me and many others is I've worked in cybersecurity for the last 15 years, so it was very hot on my mind, the cynicism, the skepticism, and the paranoia that I brought to the table for them on a daily basis made it very real. So I think, yes, the answer is yes. It's that awareness, and how do we make that awareness training and that knowledge more available on a regular basis for everybody. And that is kind of what the Cyber Resource Hub is beginning to do, and is meant to help provide from a state perspective back to the public.
I'm going to jump in here. In a previous life, I did public health and school resources and everything. Our good friends over at MDE have a great resource through the Michigan Model for Health with socio-emotional, and they do have a segment around cybersecurity and health and hygiene and stuff like that. So there are resources. This is not an unknown to anybody who deals with teenagers. It sounds like a lot of us have had to at some point in our lives, that K-12 is aware of and putting resource to, because you're absolutely right. It's got to take the whole village, very much so, from a team point.
But I will say, Jason and I have the opportunity to participate in a student event up in the UP called UberCon in November. And one of the things that we did this year was a Cyber Jeopardy. So it was an interactive kind of event for some of the students. We had like groups of 40 to 50 students at a time. And one of the questions was around, whether if you share an image with an individual, is it safe? And we talked about that, but then we did highlight, and we do try to highlight anytime we're in front of those students, is the fact that if you share that image, you are open yourself up to legal prosecution if you did not get permission from that individual to do so. And just to see the response to the individuals in the room, like it seems like a simple thing and maybe a common sense thing for us as adults, but they don't think of it that way. And so just putting that out there and reminding them it's pretty impressive, or pretty powerful to see their reactions in their faces. Again, I can't emphasize enough, the same as what the panel has. I also have two teenage daughters, and we talk about those kind of cybersecurity and technology practices just like we would any other kind of safety or health issue at the dinner table. And I've seen how they're able to to convey some of that information peer to peer to some of their friends. And I've had them come back and talk about stories about how, you know, somebody's come to them and said, hey, this is happening on my phone or that. And they've actually had enough intelligence because of the conversations. And we're not having advanced conversations by any means, but having some of the conversations in there able to help and share that information with their friends when something's going on.
Any more questions? Okay, well, thank you so very much for your presentation. Knowledge is power. You've frightened us, but you've also educated us. And we appreciate that. All right, thank you so much. Let's see. Yeah, I'd like to have a motion to excuse Representative Andrews and also Representative Churches. Okay, thank you, Representative Burns. Right, thank you, appreciate that. Okay, with no further business, the Committee on Energy and Communications and Technology is adjourned. Thank you.